Mike, welcome back to the show. Do I see some holiday decorations in your shot? I don't know, Mike. I see
It's holiday-ish.
the famous piano. Yeah, all right, okay. One of these days, you should just serenade us. Like one of these days, it should just be the Mike Benz. Maybe you could write a song that has to do with Nina Jankowicz and the State Department, and the J6 pipe bomber and stolen elections, and you could present that for us. You could perform that for us. Just a fun.
Well, we're exactly 1 month from Christmas, so maybe I'll throw on an ugly. Yeah, hit me up in 1 month's time. We'll
PR
do a
Christmas show.
ugly Trump Christmas sweater. I think I've got mine from last year. I've got a small collection building of my MAGA themed ugly sweater thing. So we'll do that.
Forgive us for the late start, Mike. I was just blown away last night by this Emerald Robinson thread detailing that machines do straight up steal elections, and that Trump knows this, and it was proven to his campaign that Elon Musk was able to stop it in sort of like a very desperate and last minute operation in order to project that we know that this process is happening, to stop it via other means. And I saw this thread. And I said, "This is insane. There's no way that this is true." And then I called a bunch of people last night, well into the evening, in the small hours of the evening, and I hate myself for doing it because I just couldn't get enough of it, because I kept hearing from everyone, "My God, how do you know this is true? This is all true." These are very powerful people. These are very connected people. These are people that obviously know. They were in the room when it happened. And they all said, yeah, this is pretty much, by and large, what occurred in 2024. We know that these machines were systematically stealing elections. We put a stop to it, and we'd like to do that permanently. And that just struck me as something that I think a story the administration should perhaps tell more full-throatedly and embrace, and tell the American people about this. But Mike, you are the master of hard truths for the American people and telling them about the world that actually exists instead of the world, the fake world that they want us to live in. So the floor is yours, Mike. Do machines steal elections in America? Has America ever stolen an election abroad? Please.
The whole reason CISA was created at DHS was because of Democrat momentum for the idea that election machines can be hacked potentially by the Russians and other malevolent forces, and that there was voting machine insecurity ahead of the November 2018 midterm elections. And that was why CISA was rushed into being set up in the first place. It was because our election infrastructure was at the cyber level was supposed to be insecure. This is how you had these kind of DNC election machine fraud documentaries like The Kill Chain produced about how easy it was to hack these machines. And this was something that was just so commonly known. It was a totally bipartisan talking point. It's something that has been talked about for decades at this point. I think it was in the mid-aughts when electronic voting machines started being this kind of project in Eastern Europe even. This is why you see these very weird State Department entanglements with companies like Smartmatic, where you had, I think, Hillary Clinton, her State Department during the Obama tenure was teamed up with Smartmatic to make sure they got shipped into these sensitive European elections, while Smartmatic's chairperson, I believe, was Mark Malloch Brown, the president of the Open Society Foundation. So, I mean, can you imagine if I don't know, the chief of staff of the Trump organization was in charge of Dominion, and then you had this kind of come from behind magic victory where Trump looks like he loses the election, but then suddenly, the next day, under these crazy circumstances, the Republican ends up winning, and the head of the company, essentially the head of the voting machine company, is like the head of the Heritage Foundation or something. I'm trying to think of, there's no real equivalent on the right to the Open Society Foundation. It's so globe spanning. But with George Soros being the number one donor to the Democrats and to the DNC writ large, for his right hand man, the head of his Wrecking Ball Foundation to be the chairperson of the electronic voting machine company.
Jeez.
I mean, it seems like a recipe for disaster. And then you come back to things like what happened in Brazil. I mean, ahead of the very sensitive 2022 presidential election in Brazil, and Bolsonaro, the then president of Brazil, is just this week has now been thrown in prison by Lula. This is the stock and trade Biden technique. You just when you win a magic mystery election in finding the votes to just narrowly come from behind and win, then you quickly imprison your political opponent who you defeated under very mysterious circumstances so that you don't need to worry about them winning again. Well, that's what's happening in Brazil. But in Brazil, it was a very strange affair because Bolsonaro was campaigning against the electronic voting machines. He led a very big crusade. He saw what happened to Trump in 2020, and he was known as the Trump of the tropics and a very Trump-aligned government. And he said, we don't want these electronic voting machines here in 2022. So what was the Biden response to that? Well, they sent Bill Burns, the head of the CIA, down to threaten Bolsonaro, not to question the upcoming hypothetical future results of an election months away. A little strange to send the CIA director personally to deliver that message. They sent the head of the U.S. military, Lloyd Austin, then the Secretary of War, to threaten the Brazilian military not to side with Bolsonaro in the event that the voting machines declare that Lula wins. They sent Victoria Nuland down there to threaten Brazilian government officials. She was then the Undersecretary for Political Affairs for the State Department. And then in a very strange twist of fate, in the midst of a chip shortage here in the United States, where it was difficult to even produce smart cars because of our semiconductor chip shortage, the U.S. State Department diverted semiconductor chips from Taiwan to send them to the head of the Brazilian Supreme Court, the very Supreme Court that is censoring tens of millions of Bolsonaro supporters. Luis Barroso, back-channeled a secret agreement with a former U.S. ambassador to Brazil, mediated by the Biden State Department, to back-channel semiconductor chips secretly into Brazil against the wishes of Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro was not even informed this was happening, in order to secretly build the electronic voting machines that resulted in his, that were, shall we say, a not insignificant part of the story of Bolsonaro's very narrow loss that day. So why did the State Department run this secret operation? You can read all about it in the Financial Times. I believe it was, the article is called "The Discreet Plot to Fortify Brazil's Elections." And they describe the highly unusual secret whole of government mobilization between the National Security Council, the CIA, the State Department, the Department of War, and the White House itself to all get these electronic voting machines into Brazil secretly against the wishes of the Brazilian president. Why on earth would we deprive Americans of semiconductor chips to build electronic voting machines in a foreign country whose head of state doesn't want them? If there's not some statecraft purpose, while we know that USAID at the same time was funneling something like $80 million into funding the Brazilian Lula campaign against Bolsonaro and building up its censorship apparatus, influencing its judges through its rule of law programs. I mean, it's, $87 million. This all went into pro-Lula groups, pro-Lula unions, pro-Lula censorship organizations, pro-Lula media outlets. This is, again, where, Benny, I try to never go beyond my receipts. So while I've got hard, completely convictable in a court beyond a shadow of doubt receipts on how the censorship apparatus was constructed, I don't candidly know what the secret sauce of the electronic voting machines, But all I can say is it stinks to high holy hell.
They really do hate democracy, don't they, man? Like, they actually do hate us. And it seems like every time that there is any type of even whiff of a populist, nationalist will of the people coalescing around a candidate or a movement, they'll shut it down. I mean, this seems to be one of the major reasons why people think the Ukraine deal is going to be scuttled, is because it will force Volodymyr Zelensky to have an election. It's like step back from the table for just a second, like sober up, drink a Gatorade, done with the hangover. Like, okay, let's actually look at this. We're sending billions to defend democracy in Ukraine. Everyone's dying. Everyone's dead. The entire country has lost an entire generation. There really isn't a Ukraine anymore at all. And the major holdup to peace is that they'll have to have an election. Mike, what the hell is that?
You know exactly what this is. They redefined democracy when they started losing elections. So instead of meaning the consensus of individuals in a vote, to meaning the consensus of institutions. Perfect. From their perspective, It is a democratic process. It takes a lot to mobilize all of the different companies in the Chamber of Commerce, to mobilize all of the different financial firms and what they're invested in terms of fossil fuels versus climate finance. It takes a lot to mobilize all the different wings of the diplomacy and intelligence and defense and development sectors to come to some sort of democratic consensus about what to do with big global policies or big initiatives around war. And if at the end of that process, which takes months and sometimes years, in the event of things like the Iran deal or the Paris Climate Accords, or say ending the Russian reset and declaring effectively a new Cold War against Russia, if at the end of that very delicate negotiating process amongst the institutions, the voters come in at the end and, like a wrecking ball, decide to vote for someone who had a funny personality, I'll say, on social media, that is considered now to be an attack on democracy if the voters go against the so-called institutions, which are which all serendipitously, every single one to a T. This is how you get even defined as an institution. It means you are a member of the club. You're a member of the blob. And virtually all of our domestic institutions at an elite level are a part of this, all the way from our universities, like our highest ranking ones like Harvard and Stanford and Yale and the like, to even our teachers unions like the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association, which all have this multi-decades long relationship with the CIA and the State Department and USAID, to all the way down to our rule of law programs, the American Bar Association. You were just talking to Mike Davis, the American Bar Association, which mysteriously to me, I don't know how this is still the case, but the American Bar Association has the sole and exclusive monopoly right to credential law schools. It is the narrow valve through which the entire American legal system passes, and it's got an exclusive delegated semi-regulatory power from the Department of Education. Meanwhile, it gets tens of millions of dollars from the U.S. State Department and USAID to go into foreign countries to work with foreign judges and foreign prosecutors to rig their judicial system in the name of judicial independence, to keep their judges and prosecutors free from government influence. Our government apparatus goes in to control it, and then lo and behold, they come back to control our own, like Norm Eisen, who was the U.S. ambassador to the Czech Republic, running the State Department Czech Republic portfolio, set up these sprawling rule of law programs to control the Czech Republic's judges and prosecutors from 2011 to 2014-ish, and then comes back as soon as Trump wins and say, hey, what do we do to take out the opposition to the State Department in the Czech Republic when I was there? Well, we went straight to the judiciary. Hey, I got a great idea. We're going to do that here. And all of these institutions need to be reformed. The funding conduits for them have to be completely renegotiated, and we had a lot of progress in this in the first 4 or 5 months of the Trump admin, especially while Elon was there. And I have to say, while we're taking stock of the end of the year, I am concerned that some of the momentum on that much of the momentum, frankly, on that has slowed, not stopped entirely, but slowed dramatically in its pace. And there's been, I think, in the past 2-3 months, a kind of reversion at the pace level to the typical affairs of statecraft, that, negotiating the Ukraine deal, negotiating these various trade deals with foreign countries, all very important stuff. But my concern is that as Elon left the White House, and that became less and less of a recently left the White House thing, a lot of the energy and initiatives that was happening at the agency by agency level have slowed. And my concern is that Trump political appointees are now kind of focused on the day-to-day rather than the once-in-a-generation opportunity we have for mass disclosures, mass transparency, and a peek behind the veil of secrecy we've lived under.
Everybody feels that, whether it's Epstein or the pipe bomber, or whether it's election fraud. Everybody feels that. It was laid bare with Thomas Crooks recently, where it's just demonstrable, empirical lies that have been told about the single most consequential, presidential assassin in our lifetimes. And Thomas Crooks is there as a ghost. Nobody knows anything about him. The FBI is lying and mischaracterizing who he was and what his ideology was. And we would have had a very different election, meaning I think that Trump could have actually won more like, something like, 35 states if we had known full well that this was somebody who was transgender or using they, them pronouns, somebody who was a radical leftist, somebody who was radically seeped in left-wing ideology and hated the president. All of that was not only kept from us, the opposite was told to us. He was a right-wing extremist. He actually loved Trump. He was wearing an American flag shirt, and he once donated to a right-wing cause, and so he was a Republican, actually. Trump deserved this. That's the story we were told by the FBI. And I, really wonder, why does it take an independent journalist, Tucker Carlson, to come out with this evidence that's clearly available, spoken in his name and his own YouTube comments? Like, what value would the Trump administration have from not disclosing everything we know about Thomas Crooks all the way down to his DNA?
I have a lot of thoughts on all of this. I can sort of, in my heart, forgive the slow pace of criminal investigations. I don't like how slow the pace has been in some of these, but I can sort of understand it. What I can't understand, I just put this in the studio chat. If you can pull up just this first link, is the web archive link.
Grabbing it right now.
This is when you put it on screen, I'll explain where I'm going with this. This was CISA's Office of Mis, Dis, and Malinformation. If you scroll down, and you'll see this, what is MDM? Open that up, and what you'll see is you will see that they specifically say domestic threat actors for the DHS Office of Mis, Dis, and Malinformation. As you'll see right there in the archive at the top, it says CISA.gov/MDM, misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. Now, Benny, as we speak, this office was around for 2 whole years, from 2021 until 2023, when basically, I don't mean to brag, but my foundation published a series of reports about it, and then they shut down the website and renamed everything. This was around for 2 whole years. Now the Disinformation Governance Board was not formed until about April 2022. This was around since January 2021, the very first week that Biden took office. The CISA's Countering Foreign Influence Task Force, which was supposed to Stop the Russians, which was repurposed to stop Trump in the 2020 election, quickly changed its name from the Countering Foreign Influence Task Force to the Office of Mis, Dis, and Malinformation, where it was no longer legally and in terms of its charter confined to foreign influence, because as they said 1 month before the 2020 election, they wanted to switch their focus to 80% domestic, 20% foreign. Now I bring this up because the second link that I put in the chat, you'll see it's the hawley.senate.gov link. This is from June 2022, and this is Hawley and Grassley. These were the documents that end up blowing up the Disinformation Governance Board. If you click on that thing that says documents, what you'll see is a 31-page PDF, which to this day, over 3 years later, represents the sum total of internal documents we have relating to the Office of Mis, Dis, and Malinformation. What I want to know is why the hell do I have more information about the Office of Mis, Dis, and Malinformation and who they targeted as domestic threat actors from the minority Republican Senate? Remember, put yourself back in the summer of 2022. You had a Democrat president, a Democrat control of the House of Representatives, and a Democrat control of the Senate. And we had more transparency about DHS's Mis, Dis, and Malinformation Office than we've had in 10 months of actually having control over the executive branch, actually having control over the House of Representatives, actually having control over the Senate. Why is nobody at DHS publishing these? I want every internal file. I want every email correspondence. I want every text from a Office of Mis, Dis, and Malinformation government employee on a DHS phone to be in a WikiLeaks style, ODNI JFK file style, DHS.gov database, where now and for centuries evermore, we have a detailed internal forensic reconstruction of the effery they did inside DHS during those years. So we can name and shame the appropriate people so that we can hold this up in the court of public opinion and say never again. Are they asleep? Did they not? Has the snooze button been on for 10 months? Do they not know it exists? It bothers me that we have more transparency from one whistleblower 3 years ago when we were out of power than we have from nominally tens of thousands of people at DHS under this executive branch while we have the executive branch power. And I say that not just about the Office of Mis, Dis, and Malinformation at DHS. I just published this video on George Soros State Department cables that I found going into the WikiLeaks archive from 2010. WikiLeaks published State Department cables that dated from 1973 to 2010. Now, these are just from a handful of ambassadors and State Department folks whose records ended up getting leaked to WikiLeaks. And I was able to reconstruct dozens of transactions and global investments by the Soros Management Fund that were intermediated by the U.S. State Department. George Soros and his older brother, Paul Soros. I have more transparency about the Open Society Foundation's relationship with the State Department from Julian Assange 15 years ago than I do from my own State Department today. The Open Society Foundation weaponized that relationship with the global transatlantic foreign policy establishment to meddle in domestic politics while hiding behind a shield of secrecy with the U.S. State Department, with USAID, with the Central Intelligence Agency. And to this day, we have zero disclosures. Benny, why has not a single cooperative agreement from USAID been made public? Can I ask that? We know a lot about the contracts that have been cut, right? A lot of the funding to USAID. And what you get are one-line descriptions. Well, this was funding a transgender dance festival in Somalia. Okay, cool. First of all, these grant descriptions are never what they say. You get a one-line description in usaspending.gov, and then everything else is under national security or foreign policy. It's you just can't get access to it. And I give the famous Zunzaneo example where you had this social USAID building a CIA social media platform in Cuba, but the USA spending.gov grant description was for humanitarian relief in Pakistan. It's spin the globe. It's totally random what the grant says versus what it actually does. But every single one of these dollars is accompanied by a cooperative agreement between USAID and the grant recipient with the actual details of what they're getting paid to do. And not a single cooperative agreement between USAID and the Open Society Foundation or the Omidyar Network or the Gates Foundation have ever been made public. None of the quarterly reports, none of the annual reports where they report on their milestones. Here's what you paid us to do. Here's how it's coming along. Here's our success. Here are the people that we're talking to in network. None of it. I need to go back to hacked records from 15 years ago to do that exercise, when nominally you've got the president's pick of personnel at state and at USAID and at the White House, and you've got a Republican majority in the House and the Senate who wouldn't block these disclosures, or could be, I don't think it would be politically palatable, frankly, and so I thought in the first couple months of the admin that because so many things were happening at a breakneck speed, that this was coming, and that and then for the next couple months, I thought, well, this takes time. And now, as the end of the year approaches, and then when 2026 starts, the focus is going to be on the midterms. I am coming to you concerned, and to all members of the administration, whether you are at DHS, whether you are at USAID, whether you're at the State Department, whether you're at the CIA or ODNI or the Department of War, I implore you, please, on behalf of the American people, on behalf of the mantle of history you inherit for this very special moment in time, where every day is a precious day where the clock is ticking down.
Yes.
Open these files and let us in.
Yes. The only way that you reestablish trust, whether it's with your girlfriend or your wife, whether it's with your dog, whether it's with your children, or whether it's with the electorate in a country that you run, is you have to be totally open and transparent with them, and you need to apologize. And you don't have to be perfect. This happens between me and my wife all the time. You just have to acknowledge that you're going to move forward, and you're going to acknowledge that some things went wrong, and you're going to be totally open about it, right? You're not going to be secretive. You're not going to be withholding or tight-fisted, ham-fisted, and bitter and cold. And that has not happened, Mike. And you got to criticize, sometimes the closest people to you are the ones who are going to have to bear the criticism of your actions and try and correct course. And that's what we're trying to do here with the Trump administration. Obviously, this Epstein thing has backfired in a spectacular way that was predictable by people like me and you, but has totally shocked the administration. I don't know why, but I pray that misread and the political damage that it has caused prescribes for them a better way forward, which is complete and total radical transparency with a American populace that elected you for that. And I want to here's my friend moment here. It's not their fault in the sense that this trust was destroyed by incompetent, stupid, malevolent leadership of our nation in the past, while Donald Trump was a TV star. But they did inherit these broken systems at the FBI and the CIA and the State Department and USAID. And so since they inherited them, and since now they have the keys, it is incumbent upon them to release everything that they have on the pipe bomber and everything that they have on Thomas Crooks And every time that Democrats or Thomas Massey or MTG or whatever, the ladies of The View, are out there looking like they're asking for more transparency than the administration, that does damage. Like, we should beat them at that game. And it is them who, frankly, are the ones committing the crimes with Jeffrey Epstein. I haven't seen anything implicating Donald Trump at all. We'd be honest about that if there was. But there's nothing. It's only Democrats, actually, who are begging him for money, who are doing his bidding in Congress, and who are his clients. So, Mike, again, I asked the question, and it might have to be the parting question, but I asked the question for your friend, for your advice that you would give to, like, your drunk friend who's making mistakes at the bar, who's like acting, who's acting up or not behaving in their right mind. Like, what is your message to the Trump administration as it pertains to this level of transparency, whether it's CISA, the Misinformation Disinformation Board, or whether it's the J6 pipe bomber? What's your advice?
I'll start by dealing with the Epstein thing first.
Please.
I've spent so many thousands of hours of my life on the Epstein kaleidoscope, and it's a fascinating, just cinematic universe. And to me, it's kind of it's a very interesting anecdote, a microcosm that once you understand that network, it helps you understand other networks. In the grand scope of global blobbery, Epstein himself is a relatively bit character, and so I assess it to be a kind of medium scale importance. But the reason it has resulted in now apparently Marjorie Taylor Greene leaving Congress and the MAGA base being fractured is because we are so fixated on the missing Epstein files because we don't have other files to sink our teeth into. Benny, imagine if today, what we just talked about, this is so simple. The files are all there at DHS for the Office of Misdis and Malinformation. Imagine if a public database was made available of every single internal communication, every single deliberative document, every single individual in the United States who was listed as a domestic threat actor, what they went after everyone for. We got the Twitter file side of it. We got a couple of disclosures through court documents. But imagine if for 3 weeks we could pour through the dis, and malinformation files of the U.S. federal government. That would, you'd still have, folks invested in the Epstein story talking about it, but we would have, it would be a show of open hands to the American people.
Yes.
That would allow us to focus on things that are important.
Yes.
And the failure to have the USAID files, the failure to have the State Department files, the failure to have the White House Information Integrity Working Group was a 26 government agency-wide coordinated censorship apparatus. I published this at my foundation. It is a frigging bombshell. The White House itself, co-led by the ODNI and the National Science Foundation, which is just the civilian arm of DARPA, led a 4-year global censorship coordinating ring, and we don't have a single file from that. And so in the absence of any other files that are relevant to our life to sink our teeth into, people are left to talk about, well, God, can't you at least get us the Epstein stuff? And, inversely, the Epstein stuff may be kind of harder politically to turn over. There's the criminal and, sort of side of it. There's, I'm hearing now that Cash is saying that the estate actually has a lot of the files and it's difficult legally to get access to. But there's no excuse for this other low-hanging fruit, which gives us months, years to dig into. This stuff takes a lot of time to dig, and you don't need to read it all. I don't think that Tulsi Gabbard necessarily read 89,000 JFK files personally before declassifying them and putting them on an ODNI.gov website. But you know what, Benny? The moment she did that, she probably bought about 6 months of unfettered goodwill from the American public.
Yes.
And nobody's followed that example. And I don't know that there's the same. I want to see evidence that the fire is burning hot there. And I know it's a tough job, and in many ways it's a thankless job until you do something really big that makes everyone say, God, thank you. I mean, people are going to be thanking Tulsi for those JFK files, which were bombshell. I mean, Benny, we went over this. One of those files had the CIA plotting with the National Security Council to drop man-made biological agents appearing to be of biological origin on Cuban agricultural crop workers. That doesn't necessarily help our diplomatic posture with Cuba. That was classified for 65 friggin' years.
I've seen this. It's a rerun. I've seen it. It's like Back to the Future. What's a rerun? Like, oh my God, the CIA created a biological agent in order to collapse an administration of a state. That's a Mike. It's like it's almost. It feels so. It feels so close. It feels so cozy. It's almost like we just lived through that.
Right. Well, I mean, that was literally the same lab. They referenced in that CIA document the Rocky Mountain Laboratory, which is the exact laboratory that got funding under Tony Fauci for gain of function for the DARPA Fern Cleveland site insertion in COVID-19.
Come on, bro.
Come
on, bro.
I mean, we could talk about that forever. But the point that I'm getting at is that is something that in my heart, when I saw that, I had zero surprise because I read Chris Newby's Bitten. And all the circumstantial evidence for that is there's so much smoke. You'd be insane not to run in the building if you had a child inside because there's probably there has to be a fire with all that smoke. But then you see the smoking gun CIA document, and now the case is closed. Now, when I go home to Thanksgiving, I don't need to say, "Oh, look at this and this and this and this and this." I can just go to odni.gov and I can hold up this document, and that's the end. And the same thing can be done at every level of this administration. And it's like, it seemed like there was a real fire while Elon was there.
Yes.
And, you know, now we're hearing reports about Doge being restructured. And I know it's being contested and yada, yada. But the fact is the priority for Doge-style declassification and serious reform does seem to have seriously slowed. And that has got to be reversed. There's got to be a big show. We need our Hoover Dam project. We need a Great Works project announced by this administration, you know, in the next month or so before the start of the new year, to really energize people about what they can expect. So we don't need to keep spending months in the dark about what's coming, fearing nothing will, because my concern is that's what leads to infighting. When you don't have forward progress on a bright, beautiful future, you fall to fighting amongst your brothers for the limited present that you have.
I hope that it is seen as a massive warning sign in the road that we elected Donald Trump on a protest vote in order to smash this corrupt system that clearly hates the people that it purports to represent and lead. And they have to do some system smashing. I know it's painful when you're in charge of the system itself, right? The FBI looks a lot different when you're the one getting the guns and the badges. But that's why Trump was elected, not to become that system. And so it is absolutely imperative that you restore that trust. And we who elect Trump on that protest vote, like those same people will elect a Mondami to do the same thing, right? The guy can't run for president, but they'll elect a Mondami proxy, like an AOC, for the same purpose. They can run on the same message, and it'll be a lie. But those voters can shift. You know, you can see it. They'll go to Bernie Sanders for the exact same purpose. And I think Republicans need to hear that message, like, and hear it now, like right now. That this is why Trump was elected, and they better become the smashing machine. And do it quickly, because otherwise they'll lose it. Yeah.
Well, I still have you since you focused a little bit more on the FBI than I have in this. I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity. I sent you in the chat just as my sort of final sign-off farewell. Here's one thing the FBI could do immediately. Yeah, could you just read these 7 steps to transparency for the FBI pipe bomb investigation? All of this is easy to do, but easy to not do if nobody's pushing you. And I hope to use your platform to, if the FBI is listening, here's how you can show. Okay, you can't find the guy. Show us what you're looking at,
or girl,
so that so step 1, upload all 39,000 raw video files. The FBI told CBS or ABC, it said in January 2022, it said it had 39,000 raw video files of the pipe bomber from different angles. So we can run a huge sweeping range of composite analyses. Number 2, upload redacted versions of all 400 plus interviews the FBI told the media it had conducted so we can get a comprehensive view of all the evidence collected. Step 3, upload redacted versions of every FBI and DOJ internal deliberative memo and internal forensic assessment analyzing the evidence compiled so we can see both the leading and alternative theories of the case as the FBI presently sees it. Help us get you past the blocking points. Step 4, upload redacted versions of every internal and DOJ email and text message related to the case from January 2021 to present so we can see how the case theory evolved over time and how it may have been sabotaged from within. I know that Kyle Seraphin has mentioned that there were these early leads and there was a license plate and a metro station. Let's see it. Step 5, internally run a detailed personnel search on the main FBI agents and DOJ officials who were in charge of the pipe bomb investigation during the Biden admin and read every communication trace they left and tell us what you found. Who was it who was in charge of who was the FBI guy in charge of the pipe bomb investigation? Who was the DOJ guy? What were their internal communications? Step 6, trace the physical chain of custody for the cameras overlooking the DNC site to see at what link in the chain of custody the footage appears to have been tampered with or degraded. I don't believe that the DNC headquarters, which was broken into in the 1970s, culminating in Watergate, had a 1 frame per second video surveillance camera 30 times worse than your average 7-Eleven. I don't believe that. I think it went into video processing and the footage was degraded and they blurred the eyes and they dropped the frame rate to 1 FPS. And I want to know who did that. Was it the FBI? Was it a third-party contractor? Number 7, cell carriers informed Congress last year that they possess intact phone usage data from the area where the 2 pipe bombs were planted at the Capitol on January 6, contradicting the Biden FBI claims that the corrupted data prevented identification of the suspect, who was both making phone calls and text messages on his cell phone while he was planting the devices.
Yes.
Request that phone data. They told Congress under the Biden admin that actually it wasn't corrupted when they sent it to the FBI. So get the uncorrupted phone data and give us a detailed update on all the investigative links you are pursuing about that phone data so that we know where you're stuck and how we can focus on. You do those 7 steps and you just bought 2-3 months of us to, instead of blaming the FBI for holding this up and keeping us in the dark, we are now level set with the FBI. We are an extension of the FBI, the same way Bellingcat and Capitol Hunters and all those crap groups were for the January 6th investigation. The SPLC was just attached to the FBI as a long arm extension. Let us be your long arm extension to help with this. And that gives us something to do with real evidence and real facts to add to our public body of record while you're continuing to run the traps internally. This is one of these things where you do that, you'll buy several months of extremely goodwill. And instead of blanketing this, we're over 4 years past it. You can't hide behind ongoing criminal investigation anymore. At this point, it doesn't matter if the pipe bomber sees what evidence we have against him. This has been 4 years. Help us help you.
The phone data has always blown my mind. Like why we don't have Thomas Crooks' phone data. Obviously, there's photos of Thomas Crooks minutes before he shot President Trump in the head on his phone. We have no idea who he's on the phone with. We have no idea who he was calling. We have no idea what he was searching. We don't know what he was doing here. Was he on a phone call? I'm sure as hell looks like it. Who was calling him right before shooting Trump in the head? We don't know. The feds know, and they refused to, even though we have this photo that was taken from a sniper who was watching him inexplicably and then locked out of his sniper nest, as the story goes. But we have this photo, so it's like an insult to us that they don't give us this information. And he's dead. The pipe bomber is presumably alive. Who knows? But the pipe bomber is also inexplicably on their phone for minutes, at half an hour, wandering around, clear as day. The companies say that they have this information. What the hell is the holdup? Because we can see, it becomes so much more insulting. You know, the Zapruder film was released like a decade after they shot and killed JFK. So it's a lot easier to kind of like bulldoze all of this. But because we can see that they're on their phones, and we all know how a phone works, and the companies say that they know who these people are, what numbers were being used, or who is being called, it's prima facie the greatest insult to a critical thinking people, which we are. No, I mean, that's dying quickly, but we still maintain the ability to say, you're lying. And the videos prove it. And the more that they continue, the more they carry this on, the more insulting it gets. Yeah, you're exactly right. And this is the pressure release that we want. I mean, I'm sorry that we don't have more time to talk about. I'll give you the last word. But to your point about JFK, in conclusion, last thing I'll say on this, you're so right, Mike. The moment they release those JFK files, and they're not even all of them, but the moment they release those files, pretty embarrassing stuff in there, stuff that clearly that the CIA wouldn't want out. The CIA bumped into Lee Harvey Oswald. They were actually, running him and operating him. I mean, they've been lying about that for 70 years. But anyway, they released that, and you could feel the pressure dissipate in society. You could feel it. I know you can. Like, you could feel it go away. And that was such a great practice, actually, in what they should be doing on all of these concurrent issues. Why they don't take that tact, I don't know. The final word is yours, Mike.
Nobody in the world wants, especially if you're successful on the outside, Cash or Dan's job at the FBI. They gave up huge salaries to be pilloried by the public and inherit something that is fundamentally unfixable. You can make changes at the margins, but at the end of the day, we have 4 political appointees at the FBI, and there's 38,000 FBI employees. So it's 4 against 38,000. Nobody, and they're setting themselves potentially for getting indicted or lawfared for the rest of their waking lives with any reform that they do. I do not envy their positions, and I think that the public needs to have perspective about the demands at the FBI level because of what they're up against on the inside. At the same time, if you're stumped, there's a what is it, a $500,000 reward for the pipe bomber's identity? If you're stumped about the pipe bomber's identity, which you clearly are, and you're tantalizing us, a lifetime worth of riches for finding this person, then let us see through your eyes. Show us what you're looking at. You know what I mean? Like, help us help you. Help us help the investigation. And they had no problem doing this with the January 6th cases. They had no problem putting out everything they had. They had an ongoing investigation about every single person on the FBI wanted list. They had no problem creating whole dossiers and making all of that public to help Capitol Hunters and Bellingcat and the Atlantic Council DFR Lab and all these, the entire whole of society, civil society network to go after and help identify anonymous criminal suspects. Yeah. Just do that here. It doesn't, we're not demanding that you have the answer because we understand what you inherited. I'm sure the FBI and DOJ burned thousands of internal files about the J6 pipe bomber. I am sure that the record they have is corrupted. But show us that record so we can help you. You may only have a handful of investigators inside the FBI that you can actually trust. You got hundreds of thousands of us, though. So let us see through your eyes, and that will help us empathize with the situation you're in. But we need to see it. Let us in.
Mike Davis giving great relationship advice there, too, as well, right? Like Mike Davis, it's like make sure that people can understand your perspective and where you're coming from and do the diligence to explain that. And that's how you have a functional relationship. And then be honest with them and then be admissible about what's, the problems that have occurred in the past. And you'll have a good relationship. People are forgiving. And people want these systems and relationships and institutions to work, actually. And so I hope that they follow your advice.
These are great people with a very difficult job, and we should also try to be as loving as we can.
I do. I pray for him.
Providing.
I do pray for him. I pray for you, Mike. I pray for you, Mike. I pray for everybody who speaks very, very difficult truths instead of sweet lies. And Mike is just one of those people. Please follow him. He's already got millions of subscribers. You should certainly be one of them. For the most honest man on the internet, and that's saying a lot. The great Mike Benz. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Benny.